The sun was beginning to dip below the skyline of Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. The city was alive with its usual rhythm: honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the distant hum of conversation. But amidst the chaos, there was a quiet corner where the world seemed to slow down. A small park, tucked between towering buildings, was home to a man named James. He sat on a weathered bench, his belongings neatly packed into a single duffel bag. James wasn't always homeless. Life had thrown him curveballs: a lost job, a broken family, and a series of misfortunes that left him with nowhere to go. Yet, despite it all, he carried himself with a quiet dignity, his eyes holding a glimmer of hope that refused to fade. James had become a familiar face in the neighborhood. People passing by would occasionally drop $1 or $2 into his cup, but most avoided eye contact, lost in their own worlds. He didn't blame them. Life was hard for everyone in different ways. He spent his days reading discarded newspapers, sketching in a worn notebook, and watching the world go by. He had dreams once, big ones, but now they felt like distant stars, too far to reach. Still, he held on to the belief that someday, somehow, things would change. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Elon Musk was having one of those days that felt like a whirlwind. Meetings, deadlines, and the constant pressure of running multiple companies weighed heavily on him. He had just wrapped up a long session at SpaceX, brainstorming ways to make space travel more accessible. As he stepped into his sleek black Tesla, he felt the need to clear his head. He decided to take a detour, driving through parts of the city he rarely visited. The streets were quieter here, lined with small shops and faded billboards. It was a stark contrast to the gleaming tech hubs he usually frequented. As he drove, his mind wandered. He thought about the future, about the impact of his work, and about the people he was trying to help. But he also thought about the present, about the people who were struggling right now, in this very moment. He had always believed in the power of innovation to change lives, but sometimes he wondered if he was doing enough. Lost in thought, he almost didn't notice the park as he passed by. Something, or someone, caught his eye. He slowed down, pulling over to the curb. There, sitting on a bench, was James. There was something about him, a quiet resilience, a sense of calm amidst the chaos, that made Elon pause. He stepped out of the car, his presence immediately drawing attention. People on the street stopped in their tracks, whispering and pointing, but Elon barely noticed. He walked over to James, who looked up, startled. "Hey," Elon said, his voice warm and genuine. "Mind if I sit?" James nodded, unsure of what to make of the situation. They talked for a while, about life, about dreams, about the world. James shared his story, and Elon listened intently, his respect for the man growing with every word. He realized that sometimes the most profound innovations weren't about technology or space travel. They were about human connection, about lifting someone up when they needed it most. As the conversation came to a close, Elon made a decision. He handed James the keys to his Tesla. "This is yours," he said simply. James stared at him, disbelief etched across his face. "I can't accept this," he stammered. But Elon insisted. "You deserve a fresh start. Take it." The crowd that had gathered around them erupted into applause, but James was silent, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't just the car. It was the gesture, the kindness, the belief that he was worth something. Elon walked away, leaving James sitting in the driver's seat of the Tesla, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. The world seemed to hold its breath for a moment, as if acknowledging the significance of what had just happened. For James, it was a turning point, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was light. And for Elon, it was a moment of clarity, a realization that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could have the most profound impact. The sun had fully set now, the city lights twinkling like stars. And in that quiet corner of the park, hope was reborn. The days that followed Elon's unexpected act of kindness were anything but ordinary. James, now the owner of a Tesla, found himself thrust into a whirlwind of attention. News of the encounter spread like wildfire, with headlines splashed across newspapers and social media. Elon Musk gifts Tesla to homeless man. The story went viral, and suddenly, James was no longer just a man on a park bench. He was a symbol of hope, a living testament to the power of generosity. But with the spotlight came challenges he hadn't anticipated. At first, James was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Strangers approached him with offers of help, jobs, housing, even donations. It felt like a dream come true, a chance to rebuild his life. But not everyone was thrilled about his sudden rise to fame. Among the crowd of well-wishers were those who viewed James with suspicion or envy. Some whispered that he didn't deserve the car, that he was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Others accused him of being a scammer, someone who had manipulated Elon into giving him the Tesla. The negativity weighed on James, stirring up old insecurities. He began to question whether he was worthy of the gift, whether he could ever live up to the expectations now placed on him. Meanwhile, Elon found himself grappling with his own set of challenges. While many praised him for his generosity, others criticized him, accusing him of using James as a publicity stunt. Why not donate to charities? Some asked. Why not address systemic issues instead of handing out cars? The backlash was unexpected, and it left Elon feeling conflicted. He had acted on impulse, driven by a genuine desire to help. But now, he wondered if he had made the right decision. The criticism gnawed at him, adding to the already immense pressure he felt as a public figure. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between James and the world around him continued to grow. He tried to make the most of his new circumstances, using the Tesla to drive for a rideshare service and save money for an apartment. But the constant scrutiny made it difficult to focus. Everywhere he went, people recognized him. Some wanted selfies, others wanted to hear his story, and a few just wanted to argue about whether he deserved the car. The attention was exhausting, and James found himself longing for the quiet anonymity of his old life. Adding to his stress was a growing sense of guilt. He couldn't shake the feeling that he owed something to Elon, that he needed to prove himself worthy of the gift. But how? He wasn't an engineer or a scientist. He didn't have the skills to contribute to Elon's world-changing projects. The more he thought about it, the more inadequate he felt. His internal struggles began to manifest in small ways. He became withdrawn, irritable, and prone to bouts of self-doubt. The weight of expectations was crushing him, and he didn't know how to break free. Elon, too, was feeling the strain. The criticism from the public was one thing, but he also faced pressure from within his own companies. Some of his executives questioned the wisdom of his actions, arguing that it set a dangerous precedent. What if people start expecting handouts? One of them asked during a tense board meeting. Elon defended his decision, but the doubt lingered. He began to second-guess himself, wondering if he had let his emotions cloud his judgment. The incident with James had sparked a larger conversation about wealth inequality and corporate responsibility, and Elon found himself at the center of it. The scrutiny was relentless, and it was taking a toll on his mental health. Amidst the chaos, a subplot began to emerge, one involving a rival tech mogul who saw an opportunity to exploit the situation. This rival, a man named Victor Kane, had long been envious of Elon's success. Victor was the CEO of a competing electric vehicle company, and he had always resented the way Elon seemed to effortlessly capture the public's imagination. When news of the Tesla gift broke, Victor saw it as a chance to undermine Elon's reputation. He began spreading rumors, suggesting that Elon's act of kindness was nothing more than a calculated PR move. He even went so far as to hire a private investigator to dig into James's past, hoping to find something that would discredit him. Victor's manipulations added another layer of tension to the story. His actions were driven by a toxic mix of jealousy and ambition, and he was willing to do whatever it took to come out on top. He didn't care about James or the impact his schemes might have on the man's life. To Victor, it was all a game, one he was determined to win. As the pressure mounted, both James and Elon found themselves at a crossroads. James was struggling to navigate his new reality, torn between gratitude and guilt, hope and fear. He wanted to believe that things would get better, but the constant scrutiny and negativity were wearing him down. Elon, on the other hand, was grappling with the consequences of his actions, questioning whether he had done more harm than good. The incident with James had opened his eyes to the complexities of wealth and privilege, but it had also left him feeling vulnerable and exposed. The tension between the two men was palpable, though they hadn't spoken since that fateful day in the park. James wanted to reach out, to thank Elon again and maybe seek his advice, but he didn't know how. Elon, for his part, wanted to check in on James to see how he was doing, but he was afraid of making things worse. The distance between them grew, fueled by misunderstandings and external pressures. As the story unfolded, it became clear that both men were on a collision course with their own insecurities and fears. The stakes were higher than ever, and the choices they made in the coming days would have far-reaching consequences. The world was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. And in the midst of it all, one question loomed large. Could a single act of kindness truly change a life, or would it only lead to more complications? The answer remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the tension was building, and something had to give. The tension that had been building for weeks finally reached its breaking point on a crisp, clear evening in downtown Los Angeles. James had been driving his Tesla, trying to make ends meet with the rideshare gig, when he received a message from an unknown number. It was a link to a news article, accompanied by a single line: "Thought you should see this." Curious, he pulled over and clicked the link. What he saw made his blood run cold. The article was a hit piece, filled with half-truths and outright lies about his past. It painted him as a manipulative opportunist who had conned Elon Musk into giving him a Tesla. The piece even included photos of him from his darker days, times he had tried to leave behind. James felt a wave of nausea as he read the comments, each one more vicious than the last. "He's a fraud," one person wrote. "Elon should take the car back," said another. The words cut deep, reopening old wounds and confirming his worst fears, that he didn't deserve the kindness he'd been shown. Meanwhile, Elon was in the middle of a high-stakes meeting at SpaceX when his assistant rushed in, holding a tablet. "You need to see this," she said urgently. Elon glanced at the screen and immediately recognized the article. His jaw tightened as he read through it, his frustration mounting. He knew this wasn't just an attack on James. It was an attack on him, too. Someone was trying to undermine his reputation, and they were using James as a pawn. Elon excused himself from the meeting and stepped outside, his mind racing. He needed to do something. But what? He couldn't let this stand. But he also didn't want to make things worse for James. As the night wore on, the situation escalated. James, overwhelmed by the backlash, made a decision that would change everything. He drove to a secluded spot overlooking the city, the Tesla's headlights cutting through the darkness. He sat there for a long time, staring at the glittering skyline, his thoughts a chaotic jumble. The weight of the world felt unbearable, and for a moment, he considered giving up, not just on the car, but on everything. But then, something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let the haters win. He wasn't going to let them define him. With a newfound resolve, he grabbed his phone and dialed Elon's number. Elon answered on the second ring. "James," he said, his voice tinged with concern, "I was just about to call you." James took a deep breath, his hands trembling. "I need your help," he said. "I don't know what to do." Elon listened as James poured out his heart, sharing his fears, his doubts, and his determination to fight back. By the time James finished speaking, Elon knew what he had to do. "Meet me at SpaceX," he said. "We'll figure this out together." The two men reunited at SpaceX headquarters, the tension between them melting away as they focused on a common goal. Elon had already begun drafting a public statement, but he wanted James's input. "This is your story," he said. "You should have a say in how it's told." Together, they crafted a message that was raw, honest, and unapologetic. James shared his journey, the highs, the lows, and the moments of despair that had led him to that park bench. Elon, in turn, spoke about his own struggles and the importance of compassion in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. When the statement was finally released, it sent shockwaves through the media. People were moved by James's vulnerability and inspired by Elon's unwavering support. The tide began to turn, with many rallying to James's defense. But the victory was short-lived. Just as the backlash started to subside, Victor Kane made his move. He held a press conference, accusing Elon of using James as a pawn in a larger game. "This isn't about kindness," Victor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "It's about control. Elon Musk doesn't care about this man. He cares about his image." The accusation hit hard, reigniting the controversy and putting both Elon and James back in the crosshairs. But this time, they were ready. Elon decided to confront Victor head-on, inviting him to a live debate on a popular news network. The stage was set for a showdown that would determine the fate of both men's reputations. The night of the debate was electric, the studio buzzing with anticipation. Elon and Victor faced off under the bright lights, their every word broadcast to millions. The tension was palpable as they sparred over topics ranging from corporate responsibility to the ethics of wealth distribution. But it was when the conversation turned to James that things got personal. Victor smirked as he launched into another tirade. But Elon cut him off. "You don't know James," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "You don't know his story, his struggles, or his strength. And you don't know what it means to truly help someone." The room fell silent as Elon's words hung in the air. For the first time, Victor seemed unsure of himself. The debate ended with a clear victory for Elon, but more importantly, it marked a turning point in the public's perception of the situation. People began to see James not as a pawn or a symbol, but as a human being with a story worth telling. In the aftermath, James found himself surrounded by a newfound sense of community. Strangers reached out with messages of support, and opportunities began to pour in: job offers, speaking engagements, even a chance to share his story in a documentary. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Elon, too, emerged from the ordeal with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that true innovation wasn't just about technology, it was about people. And sometimes, the most revolutionary act was simply to care. The climax of the story wasn't just a moment of conflict, it was a moment of transformation. For James, it was about reclaiming his narrative and finding the strength to keep going. For Elon, it was about embracing vulnerability and using his platform for good. And for the world watching, it was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, kindness could still prevail. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt like anything was possible. The days following the explosive debate were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments for everyone involved. The media frenzy had reached its peak, and now, as the dust began to settle, the true weight of what had happened started to sink in. For James, the aftermath was a mix of relief and exhaustion. He had been thrust into the spotlight in a way he never could have imagined. And while the public's support was overwhelming, it was also draining. He found himself constantly replaying the events in his mind, wondering if he had done the right thing by speaking out. The article that had tried to tear him down was still out there, a permanent stain on his past, but the outpouring of kindness from strangers helped to balance the scales. People sent him letters, emails, and even gifts, sharing their own stories of struggle and resilience. It was a reminder that he wasn't alone, that his story had touched something deep within others. But with the support came a new kind of pressure. James was now seen as a symbol of hope, a living example of how one act of kindness could change a life. He felt the weight of that responsibility every day, and it was both empowering and terrifying. He wanted to live up to the expectations, to prove that he was worthy of the second chance he'd been given, but he also worried about failing. What if he couldn't keep it together? What if he let everyone down? These thoughts haunted him, especially in the quiet moments when he was alone with his thoughts. Elon, too, was grappling with the fallout. The debate had been a turning point, not just for James, but for him as well. He had always been a man of action, someone who thrived on solving problems and pushing boundaries. But the events of the past few weeks had forced him to slow down and reflect. He realized that his impulsive decision to give James the Tesla, while well-intentioned, had created a ripple effect that he hadn't fully anticipated. The criticism, the scrutiny, the manipulation by Victor Kane, it had all taken a toll. Elon found himself questioning his own motives, wondering if he had acted out of genuine compassion, or if there had been a part of him that craved the validation of being seen as a hero. The public's perception of Elon had shifted as well. While many praised him for standing up to Victor and defending James, others remained skeptical. They saw the entire ordeal as a calculated move, a way for Elon to bolster his image and deflect from the controversies that often surrounded his companies. Elon knew he couldn't change everyone's mind, but the doubt still stung. He had always believed in the power of innovation to change the world, but now he was beginning to understand that true change required more than just technology. It required empathy, humility, and a willingness to listen. Victor Kane, on the other hand, was facing a very different kind of fallout. His attempt to undermine Elon had backfired spectacularly, and the public backlash was swift and brutal. Social media was flooded with calls to boycott his company, and his reputation took a nosedive. Victor tried to spin the narrative, issuing a half-hearted apology and claiming that his actions had been misunderstood. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and he was left to grapple with the consequences of his own hubris. For Victor, the aftermath was a harsh lesson in the dangers of envy and manipulation. He had always seen life as a game, a competition to be won at all costs, but now he was beginning to realize that there were some lines you couldn't cross without paying a price. As the weeks passed, the relationships between the key players began to shift. James and Elon stayed in touch, their bond strengthened by the shared experience. They met occasionally for coffee or a quick meal, talking about everything from James's plans for the future to Elon's latest projects. It was a strange friendship, one that neither of them could have predicted, but it was also genuine. Elon became a mentor of sorts to James, offering advice and encouragement as he navigated his new life. James, in turn, reminded Elon of the importance of staying grounded, of remembering the human side of innovation. But not all relationships fared as well. Victor's betrayal had left a lasting mark, and the trust between him and Elon was irreparably broken. Elon made it clear that he wanted nothing more to do with Victor, cutting ties both professionally and personally. Victor, for his part, tried to move on, but the shadow of his actions followed him wherever he went. He became more isolated, his once booming career now in shambles. It was a stark reminder of the cost of ambition when it was driven by the wrong motives. The legal consequences of the ordeal were minimal, but the emotional and psychological scars ran deep. James had to deal with the lingering effects of the public scrutiny, while Elon faced the ongoing challenge of balancing his public persona with his private struggles. Victor, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered reputation, a task that seemed almost impossible. In the end, the fallout from the climax was a mixed bag of triumphs and tribulations. James had found a new sense of purpose, but he also carried the weight of expectations. Elon had gained a deeper understanding of the impact of his actions, but he also faced the reality of his own limitations. And Victor, once a powerful figure in the tech world, was now a cautionary tale, a reminder of what could happen when ambition turned toxic. As the story moved toward its resolution, one thing was clear. The events of the past few weeks had changed everyone involved in ways they were still trying to understand. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. For James, it was a chance to rebuild his life on his own terms. For Elon, it was an opportunity to redefine what it meant to be a leader. And for Victor, it was a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront the choices that had led him to this point. The fallout was far from over, but it was also a new beginning, a chance to learn, grow, and perhaps to heal. The story of James, Elon, and Victor didn't end with a neat bow, but rather with a series of quiet, transformative moments that reshaped their lives in ways they could never have anticipated. For James, the journey was one of rediscovery. With Elon's continued support, he found stable work at a local nonprofit that helped homeless individuals rebuild their lives. It was a full-circle moment for James, who now used his own experiences to inspire and guide others. The Tesla, once a symbol of his unexpected fortune, became a practical tool for his new job, allowing him to transport supplies and people in need. But more than that, it served as a daily reminder of the kindness that had changed his life. James still had his struggles. Nights when the weight of his past felt too heavy, days when the pressure to be a success story threatened to overwhelm him. But he had also found a sense of purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. He began to see himself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a survivor, someone who had the power to make a difference, no matter how small. Elon, too, emerged from the ordeal with a new perspective. The experience had forced him to confront the complexities of his own influence and the responsibilities that came with it. He became more intentional about his philanthropic efforts, focusing on initiatives that addressed systemic issues like homelessness and inequality. He also made a conscious effort to be more transparent and vulnerable in his public appearances, sharing his own struggles with mental health and the pressures of leadership. It wasn't always easy. Elon was a private person by nature, and opening up didn't come naturally to him. But he realized that his vulnerability could be a source of strength, a way to connect with others on a deeper level. The bond he had formed with James remained one of the most meaningful relationships in his life, a reminder that true innovation wasn't just about changing the world, it was about changing lives. Victor Kane's story took a different turn. The fallout from his failed attempt to undermine Elon left him isolated and embittered. His company's stock plummeted, and he was eventually forced to step down as CEO. The once powerful mogul became a recluse, retreating from the public eye and grappling with the consequences of his actions. In the rare interviews he gave, Victor seemed a shadow of his former self, his confidence replaced by a quiet resignation. He spoke of regret, of wishing he had chosen a different path, but the damage had been done. Victor's downfall served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrosive effects of envy. Yet, even in his lowest moments, there was a glimmer of hope. Victor began to volunteer at a local charity, quietly giving back to the community he had once scorned. It was a small step, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild, not just his reputation, but his sense of self. The broader impact of the story resonated far beyond the lives of these three men. It sparked a national conversation about wealth inequality, corporate responsibility, and the power of kindness. Elon's act of generosity, while controversial, had ignited a wave of similar gestures across the country. People began to look for ways to help those in need, whether through donations, volunteer work, or simple acts of compassion. The story also prompted a deeper examination of the systems that perpetuated homelessness and poverty, leading to increased funding for social programs and policy changes aimed at addressing these issues. It was a reminder that while individual acts of kindness were important, lasting change required collective action. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the way people viewed success and failure. James's journey from homelessness to hope challenged the notion that success was a straight line, a series of achievements that could be easily measured. His story showed that resilience, courage, and the willingness to keep going in the face of adversity were just as important as any material success. Elon's willingness to admit his mistakes and learn from them humanized him in the eyes of the public, proving that even the most accomplished individuals were still works in progress. And Victor's fall from grace served as a sobering reminder that success, when pursued at the expense of others, could be hollow and fleeting. As the story drew to a close, it left readers with a sense of hope and a call to reflection. It was a reminder that life was messy and unpredictable, filled with moments of triumph and despair, kindness and cruelty. But it was also a testament to the power of human connection, the ability of one person's actions to ripple out and touch countless lives. James, Elon, and Victor were all flawed, complex individuals, each grappling with their own demons and striving to make sense of their place in the world. Their stories were a mirror, reflecting the best and worst of human nature and challenging us to consider our own choices and the impact they might have. In the end, the story wasn't just about a Tesla or a viral moment. It was about the choices we make and the legacy we leave behind. It was about the importance of empathy, the courage to admit when we're wrong, and the resilience to keep going even when the road ahead seems impossible. It was a reminder that no matter how far we fall, there is always the possibility of redemption, of finding our way back to the light. As the final chapter closed, the world continued to turn, carrying with it the echoes of what had happened. James, Elon, and Victor each moved forward in their own way, forever changed by the events that had brought them together. And for those who had followed their journey, the story lingered, a quiet invitation to reflect on the complexities of life and the power we all have to make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time.